Today's objectives is to learn Unit 1 vocabulary and also to review integer operations. So the first thing we're doing is we are going to talk about some of the vocabulary terms that you will see during the first unit of algebra and throughout the year. First word is constant. I'm going to fill in the blank. A constant is a number by itself. For example, it could be 3, -8, 50. Any number by itself is called a constant. Variable is a symbol or letter that represents a number. So for example, when you were in elementary school, it might have given you things like this, where you have a little box, +2 = 5, and you were supposed to fill in the box with the correct number, so 3. So that box is a variable. So it can be a symbol like a box. Now that we're in high school, instead of using symbols like boxes, we use letters like X, Y, A, whatever letter you want to represent a number. Coefficient is the number before the variable, before the letter. It is being multiplied. So for example, 5x, the 5 is the number before the variable. That is the coefficient. A term is a number, a letter, or the combination of a number and variable. So instead of saying letter here, let's use the vocabulary. Let's say variable. So a letter is a variable. We're using academic vocabulary, so let's say variable. So a number, a variable, or the combination of a number and variable. So for example, -5x is a term. It has a number, a variable. 8 can also be considered a term. It's a constant. Y can also be considered a term. It's a variable. So it could be a number by itself, a letter by itself, a variable by itself, or the combination of both. Expression is the next term. Expression is a mathematical phrase that includes numbers, variables, and operators. So operators would be like your operation symbols: plus, minus, times, and division. So an example of an expression would be 3x plus 5. So I have numbers, I have letters, and I have the operator, the plus sign. Now an equation is two expressions set equal to each other. So I'm going to take this expression, for example, 3x plus 5, and it is just equal to something. So for example, so the 10 is an expression, or let's say 10x plus 3. 10x plus 3 an expression, that's an expression, and there's an equal sign in between. Right, the last two terms on page 1 are substitute and evaluate. Substitute is to replace a variable with a given number. So for example, let's say we have 5x plus 2. we would replace the variable, the letter, with any number they gave me. So for example, if x is a 1, then I will replace it with a 1. That is to substitute. And then from here, we move on to evaluate. So to evaluate something is to simplify a given expression and solve for an answer, which we want a number. So here I substitute the variable with a 1. And then when I evaluate, I just multiply 5 times 1. That's 5 plus 2. That's 7. So that's to evaluate. It's just to get a final answer. Okay, so this unit, we are going to be solving equations. And so you will see a lot of the terms that we went over in this unit. But something that we're going to move on to today, something else that we're going to move on to today is just simple integer operations, because it is something easy, but whenever we have negatives, a lot of the time students get confused easily. So we're going to review strategies that you can use whenever you are working with integers. So in my example on page 2.5, I have 4 minus 6. So there's 2 ways that you can do this if you have a hard time adding and subtracting numbers, especially when there's negatives, like I said. One way that you can solve this problem is by drawing a number line. So we have 0 in the center, and then we have the positives to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have the negatives to the left, -1, -2, -3, -4. So my problem is 4. We start with 4, so here's my 4. And then it says minus 6. So anytime we have a minus, we're moving backwards. So we're taking it away. We're going to move back 6 units. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I end up at -2. And so my answer for this is -2. If you don't like drawing number lines, then what you can also do is something that's called the scoreboard method. And so we draw a little T-chart. First number is on the left side, second number, including the sign that's next to it or before it, it's -6. And then we just draw for the 4, we draw 4 positive signs. For the -6, because it's negative, we draw 6 negative signs. And then we're gonna circle and cross out the 0 pairs. So a positive and a negative cancel each other. So they cancel, those cancel, those cancel, and we are left with 1, 2 negative symbols. So my answer is -2. So you can choose whichever method you prefer to work the problems if you have a hard time, again, working with those negatives. So let's look at 2 more examples. Number 1, I have 2 minus 8. So I'm going to draw my little T-chart. 2, and then it's a -8. That's the sign before it, -8. So it's 2 positive signs, and then 8 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, 0 pairs cancel, so that cancels. This cancels, and I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. So my answer is -6. I'm gonna do one more example. We're gonna do number 3. Same thing. So I'm gonna draw my little T-chart. First number is -4. I'm gonna draw 4 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. My second number is +10. So 10 plus signs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm going to cross out the 0 pairs. Positive and negative cancel. Positive and negative cancel. So I just cancel my 0 pairs and I count whatever's left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positives. So my answer is +6. Okay, so again, you don't have to do this all the time, only if you have a hard time when you're working with negative integers. Okay, we have another example here, but now we have like kind of like a double negative. So I want to talk about that also. So here, same methods that we talked about in the previous examples. First with the number line. First number is -5.
Springwood High School. Shelter in place, we're a chemical shelter in place. Fill your ropes, lock your doors, and remain in place. We're a chemical shelter in place.
Okay, so we start at -5. And because it's a negative, a minus, we're gonna go back 3. So 1, 2, 3, I end up at -8. So my answer is -8. Same thing with the scoreboard method, -5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives, and then -3. So I have 3 negatives. Here, I cannot cancel anything because there's no zero pairs. Only a plus and a minus cancel each other. Here, they're all negatives. So I cannot cancel anything. I'm going to count everything that I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 negatives in total. And that's why my answer is -8. So let's try number 1 together. Number 1, draw a little T-chart. I have a -2 on the left side, 1, 2, and -3 on the right side. -1, -2, -3. Again, there's no plus sign, so I cannot cancel them. All I have to do is add them all up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my answer is -5. Okay. We're gonna move on to multiplying integers. I'm gonna go back to page 2. And we are going to look at some examples. So the rule when you're multiplying or dividing integers is that 1 negative makes a negative. 2 negatives makes a positive. So for example here, negative times a positive is a negative. 3 times 4 is -12. Negative times a negative, it's a positive 12. So applying that rule, I can just look at my numbers, just worry about multiplying my numbers. 2 times 3 is 6. Now I have to know if it's positive or negative. So a negative and a negative, 2 negatives makes a positive. So it's a +6. For number 2, 5 times 6. 5 times 6 is 30. I multiply. And then there's only 1 negative, and we know 1 negative makes a negative. So my answer should be -30. Okay, so here we're more worried about kind of working with the signs. Most of you already know how to multiply. You already know your multiplication tables. When it comes to the negatives, that's where a lot of practice is needed. Okay, another one, -2 times 4 is -8 because 1 negative makes a negative. -4 times -6, 2 negatives make a positive.
We are clear from a chemical in chemical shelter. Thank you.
Right, last thing is dividing, which is pretty much the same thing. 1 negative still makes a negative, 2 negatives still make a positive, but now we're dividing. So division, you'll see it as a fraction. That symbol of fraction, that means division. So we are dividing. So we're gonna do examples 1 and 2 together. -8 divided by 2, that's 4. And this 1 negative makes a negative. Number 2, 20 divided by -4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. And again, 1 negative makes a negative. So it has to be -5. Now, number 3, I have 2 negatives. So 2 negatives makes a positive. So I'm going to have a positive answer. -12 divided by -6, +2. So here it's just about remembering the rules. 1 negative makes a negative. 2 negatives makes a positive. Once you finish the practice in the packet, you will complete the homework 1.1.